As you can see here, there's a lot of knobs and dials to tinker with. So I'm making this video as a way to go over everything. I'll try to cover, and I'll go by the information pane here and try to cover most of the things here, because I believe all the important things are mentioned here. I just think it's sort of easier to see all of these things, you know, in a video. When I go over them verbally, it's easier to assimilate, and it's also easier to see it actually being done. Um, Now, I'll be the first person to say some of the things on the report take a bit of time to load when you first launch the report, but the way Power BI works, I imagine, is like it saves things to your RAM, or I'd imagine your RAM, because as you saw probably, this GIF here that is going through some of the things took like 5-6 seconds to load, but once I close it and open it, it will load faster. Similarly, if I hover over one player, it will take a solid 5 seconds to load. But then if I hover on off and then on again, it loads much quicker. So I'm trying to improve these things, and those are my main focus to improve. I want to make the report feel snappy, and it's not there at the moment. But in terms of the bells and the whistles, I think the report is in a very good shape. So I guess the best place to start off is to sort of explain why I made this. And as with most projects I work on and most things I do, it comes from, first and foremost, what do I want, right? I designed this report playing in the FPL. I'm the sort of person who's like obsessed with optimizing things and finding the perfect solution and, like, min-maxing. So I was like, I don't have this data. It would be really cool to have this data. And every decision I've made about this report has been from the standpoint of, okay, what do I want when I'm making my team, right? And I believe that this vision will probably extend to a lot of other FPL players, because you will be in a similar spot to me. So that's where the vision of the report comes from, and with that, it probably means that I've missed some things, right? Because I've only played the FPL for a couple of years. There's probably way more experienced people, and I'd be very interested to hear your opinions on what this report lacks and what it can do better. Anyways, so that's the grand vision, and let's just dive into the details. What I think I'll do is I'll just work my way down on all of these points here. So at the start, if you click this GIF here, it will redirect you to, well, the YouTube video you're watching. Probably doesn't need any mentioning, right? Right. Okay. So how the filters work in Power BI, and if you've used Power BI before in any capacity, these are things you're familiar with. But when you're selecting a list, I can select a list of players, right? And if I click Alison Becker and then I go down and I click Aronson, what will happen is that the Becker selection will get cleared. So all you need to do is hold Control on your keyboard and then click the second player and the third player and the fourth player and the fifth player, and they will all get selected, right? And that's how you select players. Um, Works the same way on teams, right? And what will happen here, so that's an interesting example I've picked. It will show you only the players you see that I had selected and who are from those teams. So because none of the players I selected are from Arsenal or Brighton, none of them will get shown. If I go ahead and clear those filters, now those players will be shown again, right? And it remembers what players you had selected. Another thing to point out, on the scatter plot, you will see that only 2 of the players are shown, and that's because I imagine the other players haven't played 40% or more of the total possible minutes they've had. If I remove this restriction, I imagine all, 5 players will be shown. And you can see them as very small points here, because the size is correlating to the amount of minutes they've played. And I imagine if I select the 2022-2023 season as well, that all 5 players will be shown. And what I did there was I didn't hold Control, right? So it didn't select it. So if I deselect everything, you can see 5 names now, right? So another thing to point out on these filters, if nothing is selected, obviously it behaves as if everything is selected. So let's go back to only the current season, because I think that's the sort of scope I would want to work with. I usually prefer to look only at the calendar year, to be fair. I like to look at a sample size of 15 to 20 game weeks. I think it gives a pretty good indication of the form a player is in. So let's go back and let's deselect everything. Let's go back to 40%. So you have to do 0.4 because that's what 40% is. It's 0.4. So 37% would be 0.37, and so on. And that covers most of the filters. Now, actually, I think this Teams filter, you don't even need to hold control because it's like one of the new filters that Power BI is adding. So I think they're moving away from that holding control. So all of these things, as Power BI is evolving, this dashboard is going to evolve with it as well, and it's a dashboard I plan on maintaining, and it will improve down the line. So it is actually a bit annoying to hold control as you're selecting all of these players. So we're moving away from that. And as you can see, by the way, on this players list, it's dynamic, as you've probably noticed, because Alisson Becker is no longer on here since he hasn't played more than 40 minutes because he's been injured for a large part of the season this calendar year. But if I remove that restriction, oh no, it's because I haven't, I've got teams selected. So now he'll come back up. I feel like I'm waffling at this point and going over. No, he hasn't come back. That's oh right. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm clicking the buttons too fast. That's annoying. That's one of the things I want to improve because I'm clicking the buttons and then it's resetting. I feel it's a symptom of the slicer not being in a great place in terms of like it's still being worked on by the Microsoft. Okay, so let's go back to our standard filters and let's get on to some of the deeper things, right? Um, so we've covered that a filter behaves the same as if nothing is selected when, well, it behaves the same way as if everything is selected when nothing is selected. Right, okay, so that's a point worth mentioning. So if I select again to my primary example of Alisson Becker, I think he won't be. Oh, he is. So he actually has played more than 40 minutes. Okay, or 40%. So if you go down, obviously this filter or I mean this page here. So if I select more than one player, it doesn't show anything because this is like a one player detail view. So you have to have exactly one player selected. If I select two players, then it won't show anything. You see it's trying to load one and then it's unloading it. If I only select one player, let's go with that. So this slicer is going to affect both this sort of window here, the in-depth player view, and it's also going to affect the news page, right? So it's going to show you all the news only about this player. And this works the same if you select, I'm actually curious, is it only showing the 2024? Yes, it is. So it's only showing news from 2024, the game weeks from 2024. So I'll go onto the news page in a little bit because there are some intricacies with how the API is calculating the dates. But just to mention that all of these slices trickle down to the entire page, right? As you would think. So if I select Liverpool, it will show me all the news related to Liverpool. All right, cool. Um, and that obviously goes for all the slices and all the visuals, except like a few exceptions. It works in an intuitive way. Let's put it that way. Right, okay, so you can blow up these charts to fit your screen. So what you'll notice, for example, is that this scatter chart has to be a little bit smaller on the page because there's a lot of other things around it. Maybe you want to tinker with your settings, set them as you want, right, and then you want to look at this chart. Well, what you can do is you can click on the chart. You can see there are some buttons here right behind the slicer. So that's not amazing because you'd want these buttons to always be visible. But what you can do is you can click somewhere in the area of this chart and then the buttons will come to the front. And then you can click on this focus mode button and this will show you a blown up page of the chart. And what I'm realizing now is that it actually blows it up to the full height, which is not amazing. It takes the height of the report when it blows it up. So um, probably not the most useful feature in the world. Um, So what I'll do now is I'll just show you something. If I tinker with all of these filters, what will happen is if I refresh the page, my goalkeeper, my team, my seasons, my percentage of minutes played, and any other filters that I might have touched, they will all get refreshed. And they'll get refreshed to default filters that are loaded when you load up the page. Um, so that's what I deem to be the most useful filters for myself, right? And what I deem to be generally useful filters. Now, if I click the reset button, what this will do instead is it will clear all the filters. So what it will do is you have to click the yes and then the X button. So it will clear all the seasons, it will clear all the percentages, it will clear any other filters that you might have had set, and it will just show you the data from blank. Now, it doesn't clear these selections because at least one needs to be selected always. So it just keeps them to what you've had before. It doesn't tinker with those. It will have whatever metrics you had set. And we'll get onto those metrics in a second. So let's just go back to the standard filters. So I'll just refresh the page because I think those are the useful filters to look at. And now I believe the next section is just about, yeah, so that's the clicking reset filters. So let's just go on to some of the metrics in this in the scatter plot, because this is sort of the main feature of this page, I believe. It's the main reason why I created this, is because of the scatter plot. I believe it's a very good way to visualize information and the correlation between different factors. What you can do is you can look at a set of factors, you can look at their correlation, think about that, then change the metrics around, and then you can know which players excelled in one place, which players excelled in another place. Now, I'm just noticing that these two boxes are overlapping, so that's something I'll fix after this video. But what you can do is, right now, let's go over some of the different metrics that I list here. I list why they're useful. So the first metric that I talk about is the metric that you have currently on screen. Points per 90 versus current costs. And what this does is it's very good if, let's say, Palmer, right? If I select points instead of points per 90 on the y-axis, Palmer won't be the highest player on the chart because he hasn't gotten all the minutes. He's up there. Palmer's actually a bad example because he has actually gotten quite a few minutes. But somebody like Bruno Fernandes is very high up on that chart, and that's because he's played basically every single minute for Man United. I don't know if it's every single minute. He's played almost all the minutes for Man United. He's one of their core players. But if I go to points per 90, you'll see actually this inflation of points, because he's getting so much playtime, it actually falls off. And Bruno Fernandes, he goes down. Where does he go? He goes somewhere in the middle of the pack, I believe. Yeah, he's right here. So not nearly as impressive as you would think by looking at his points. So this sort of disambiguates players who are very efficient at scoring points in a 90-minute period versus players who accumulate a lot of points by constantly being a starter. And both things are useful, but let's say a player only started shining in the second half of the season, like Muniz, for example. And I don't know if Muniz is on here because I don't know if he has more than 40 minutes played over the whole season. I would imagine he has more than 25%. I would imagine he's quite a lot higher. If I do Fulham, let's see if Muniz is going to come up. No, he is, okay. So he's right here. But he only has what, like 86 points. So if we did points, he would not be nearly as much of a standout as he is on this axis. So yeah, you can see he's right down there. Okay, so, and another thing to talk about this scatter chart, by the way, is what you'll notice is when I do the team selection. So let's do Fulham again because it will load a bit quicker. The axes don't change, right? You can see that no rescaling is happening. But then when I change the set of minutes, like the percentage of minutes played, what will happen is that the axis scale will change. Well, actually, I've picked a bad example. On points per 90, if we go to points per 90, because there will be some very big outliers like this player, NS Unau, right? He will have to be accounted for, so this axis will change to show his points. But then, if we increase the amount of minutes that he has to have played, this axis will recalibrate. But when you select a team, it doesn't recalibrate in the same way. So that's just so that you can see where a team stands in the scatter chart without everything being rescaled. So I like to sort of select and unselect teams and see where they sit, sort of. And you can get a very good idea about which teams have players which score a very decent amount of points. A lot of Arsenal players, for example, have a very high point per game average because they concede very few goals and their defenders get a lot of clean sheets. All right, okay. I'm talking a bit too much, so let's go for it a bit quicker. So there's another metric which is points per 90 per set amount of money. So this 6.67 million amount is the 100 million budget that you have divided by the 15 spots that you have on the team. So effectively, for the amount of money you can spend on one player, if they play 90 minutes, how many points are they going to score? And what you're going to see is that although Palmer is the leader here right now in points per 90, when we increase the statistic to points per 90 per 6.67 million, Palmer's going to excel even more because he's so much cheaper. So in comparison to someone like Salah and Haaland, they lost a lot of their points per 90 because they're very expensive players. So when they cost 14 million, they sort of get their points halved because 14 million is like more than double of 6.67. While players like Palmer, who are right around the 6.67 million price point, they don't see that decrease. So they stay where they are while the others get sort of deflated. And that the same thing happens with Son and Saka and Watkins and so on. So if you're interested in keeping your budget, right, if you're interested in finding a player for a particular price, this is a good metric to sort of highlight those. And obviously what you can do is you can also decrease this price and it will sort of swipe along and it will clear all of the names that cost more. So that's another useful metric that you can use. Another useful metric is the 90s versus their cost. So you can see how many minutes players are getting. So for example, let's say you've picked out your starting 11 players and you spend a lot of money on them. And for the other 4 players, let's say you have like 17 million or something. So not that much money. What you can do is you can go to 90s, and that's right here. So that's just the number of minutes they've played divided by the number by 90. So that tells you, you know, effectively how many games they've played. But it's sort of accumulating it across all games where they've been substituted in, where they've started and only played 20 minutes, and so on. So 90 is divided by current cost right here. And if we just drag the slider along to zoom in so that we can see a bit more clearly, along this price point, we can see that there are quite a few players who start a lot of games and they play a lot of games, but maybe they don't earn so many points, so they are quite cheap. So these are opportunities to find cheap players. And if you're looking for a defender, you can select a defender. And now you can find yourself a pretty cheap defender who's sure to start a lot of games. And he's a useful sub to have because if one of your main players gets injured, he'll come in, he'll get some minutes. By extension, you can also do the same thing with points per 90. And that way you can find a player who's also earning points. If you think a team is going to keep a clean sheet, then you're interested. So let's say it's I don't know, a team that concedes a lot of goals, so like Chelsea, for example, but they're playing Sheffield United, and you're saying, okay, I don't think they're going to concede against them. Then you can use this 90s metric to sort of find a Chelsea player who's playing a lot of 90s, but not necessarily earning points, and you're saying, oh, he's going to earn points because they're going to keep a clean sheet, because that's more of like a team metric rather than a player. Okay, then we have points per 90 versus fixtures difficulty, and that's a fun one. You can use this rubber in the top right here to clear the filter selections that you have. I don't think I had any other selections. So if we do points per 90 by the fixtures difficulty. So from all the fixtures I've selected, and that's those fixtures here, so the current week, which is still ongoing, there's one match to be played. Let's reset this x-axis. Huh, that's interesting. Okay. No, that looks fine. I thought I had some filter on. So from all the fixtures that have been played so far in 2023 and 2024, you can see that there's a array of difficulties. So for example, someone like Ben Mee, if we look through his games, Ben Mee has played most of his minutes. As you can see, he's got minutes played 0, 0, 0, 0 in the last few games. I guess has been injured. So he hasn't played all of his games, and when he has played, he's playing against West Ham at home or away, I guess. He's played against Liverpool, Man City, Tottenham. So all of his games and all of the points he's earned come from very, very difficult games. So he's somebody who's isolated on this chart, and you can see, oh, okay, he's had troublesome games. Whereas someone like Palmer, he's sort of, I wouldn't say he's got like easy games, but he's on the sort of easier side. You can see here what the split is like. He's on the easy side, right? And then someone like Richarlison is completely inflated. He sort of played most of his minutes against weaker teams. So that's a useful metric for disambiguating that. And on the same topic, and the final metric that I talk about here, fixtures count versus fixtures difficulty. So what you can do here is you can select the fixtures count. So in the future, how many fixtures do they have coming up? And in the future, what are those fixtures difficulty? So has this updated? Okay, now it has updated. So what you can see here is that all the players are like on the same point because all the players have the same upcoming games. Everybody from Arsenal is going to have the same upcoming games, right? So what you can see here is that who is this? Tottenham. Tottenham have very, very difficult upcoming games, and you can see them there on the right. They've got Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, City, and then Burnley, Sheffield at the end. So it might actually be quite good to pick up a Tottenham player in week 36 because they've got a double game week and then they've got Burnley, Sheffield, some of the weakest teams in the league. But right now you need to dump them because they've got a set of 4 games which are going to be very, very difficult. On the contrary, you've got players like from Newcastle, I believe this is, and they have a set of quite easy games. The only difficult game they have is against Man United, and well, probably not a very difficult game, seeing Man United recently. But they also have 6 fixtures coming up, while the team with the set of easiest fixtures is Brentford, but they only have 5 fixtures to play. So, and what you can do is you can go into this window, which is to change the game week context to the future fixtures, and here you can select only the fixtures from April, for example, only the next 2 fixtures. And what this will do is it will update this graph and it will tell you over the next 2 weeks, all of these teams are going to play an extra game. So that's Arsenal, I believe City should be in there as well. And what happens is if 2 teams are stacked right on top of each other, which is a bit unlikely because you've got the, so many different spots, but it will happen that some teams are stacked on top of each other. You can sort of just go by team, so it's not completely ideal. But I think City should have an extra game in the month of April. Oh no, they don't. They've got 2 games. Whereas there are other teams which have 3 games. So you can sort of pick out. This video is much longer than I intended it for it to be, but let's just go through everything and be quite thorough. So you can use that as you deem fit, and there's probably a myriad of use cases that I haven't covered or haven't even thought of. Right at the end, for data integrity reasons, I've decided that all the metrics, well, this is actually a good counterexample of a metric. So the difficulty is something that's calculated by the FPL API, and the difficulty is solely determined by them. So I have no doing with what the difficulty of teams is, and it's rated between 2 and 5. So in this sense, it doesn't make sense for us to start at 0 because it's a made up metric, right? It could have been 200, 300, 400, and 500. And then if you start at 0, you're basically using space in the chart to show irrelevant data. But for things like cost, it's actually important to show the 0 because, and I'll demonstrate this using the slider. Let's wait for the points per 90 to load, just so we're staring at something a bit more beautiful. So right now you can see, you can sort of compare the distance between like Salah and Haaland and the rest of the pack, and then you can see that there's some distance from like the cheapest players to 0, right? But if I do this, now the chart's a bit more deceiving, right? And it's putting Salah and Haaland even more on an island, and you're thinking, oh, look at all these players, and then you've got Salah and Haaland. So it's just about what your eyes see and perceive when you look at the chart, right? Um, so if I moved it to an arbitrary amount, what you can see here is, you can see if we had it set to something like this, then you would think, if you're looking at only these 3 players, oh wow, Son is such a better deal because he's one of the best in terms of cost, and Salah and Haaland are one of the worst. So the point offset is worth it, right? They're earning a bit less points, or he's earning a bit less points, but he's so much cheaper. But then if I scale it back out, you can see that the distance is not as much as it was perceived before. Um, and then you've got the info tooltip box that appears when you hovered over a point. Just because I got this feedback from a friend when they were using the chart. This is non-interactable, so like even if you go to click, you'll see it will respond, but it disappears, and there's no way to make it not disappear. This is just like the lag of the report. So some information about the data. It's coming from the FPL API, which is completely free to use. And I have a link here on documentation, people who've used it, and sort of tell you this is this, this is that. And not everything is 100% covered, but this is a very, very good guide. It's very useful. It really helped get me on track. So I recommend you guys go check it out if you're going to work with this. I fetch the data right now twice a day at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And this might change depending on requests. Maybe I'll do it 4 times a day. If it changes, it will be reflected here. But right now it's 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern time because that's generally before the Saturday games start and after the late games on throughout the week have had time to conclude, right? 7 p.m. EST is like midnight, essentially, UK time. Right, so there are players like Harry Kane, for example, who left Tottenham right at the start of the season, but for some reason, well, not for some reason, the FPL API considers them as still being players in the league. So you'll see, I thought he should appear here. Well, what you can see here in this table is that he's getting counted for every match, and it's being counted as he's not playing. And the reason why he's not playing is because he transferred to Bayern Munich, and this is given as a status, sort of like how he'd been injured. So essentially, if Harry Kane got injured at the start of the season for Tottenham and he was injured for the whole season, the data would be identical. But from next season on, Harry Kane won't be in the database at all. So if you only select the 2024-2025 season, and Harry Kane won't be on this list at all, and none of these games will be pointed out for Harry Kane. If I can think of a good example of a player who left the Premier League and they were only there in 2022-2023, like a club who got relegated, so any of the Southampton players, for example. So this team slicer will get updated to show those teams. And if I select someone from Southampton, right, then all the games that are going to be shown on here are going to be from 2022-2023. So the current season is not being shown. So that's a disambiguation I wanted to point out. Right, okay. So I went over this briefly when I did the future fixtures. What you can do is, so let's say we're looking at and let's remove all of these filters, go back to 2023, 2024. Let's set it to 40 minutes so we can actually see what's going on in the chart and not have it be inflated by anomalies. So if we select the selected fixture difficulty, obviously this is going to change. Well, I say obvious. It intuitively you'd think it will change when you deselect a set of game weeks, and it does. So I just wanted to confirm that this is the way it works, and this is the way it works for all other metrics where you intuitively think it would. Right, so I showed you earlier with the news that it will only now be showing news from the selected time period of game weeks. Okay, let's go back to the info and work our way down. Um, right, so I do plan to upload all the data associated with this project and all the processing that is done on this data as a Power BI file and as as the raw data before I process it, and you'll also see all the processing that happens to it. So I plan to do that. There's a technical problem that I have to overcome for this to be viable. So I plan to do that in the future. And unfortunately, since all the logic that gets done on the data is baked into the Power BI client, I will be unable to sort of maintain this via a repo on GitHub, which is what I would want to do ideally with a project like this, because I want it to grow organically through the community. But I don't know if there's a way to do that with DAX. If there's a way and there's something I don't know, because I know Microsoft owns GitHub, as far as I know, or they have a stake in it, maybe there's some interaction there that I don't know about. So sometimes there are janky interactions. So for example, on this page, if I click on this box here, what will happen is it will bring this box to the foreground because right now this gray background is behind all of these boxes. When I select it, it brings it to the front as it works with all visuals. So if I click somewhere else on the screen, then it fixes itself. So that's the way to fix it. It's not ideal, but for some of the things, there's just no way to work around it, and it makes the UI a lot better to have it structured this way. So in the future, so as I mentioned earlier, my biggest sort of thing I want to improve is to make it snappier, make it load quicker, improve the way I'm processing data, optimize these things. Then I want to eliminate this jankiness that I mentioned, where like you click a box. So hopefully as Power BI develops, more customization tools will be available to us. And that's interesting. Right. Hmm. It wasn't fixing itself earlier when I was clicking on it. Anyways, so I want to eliminate all of these things, but that will come as Power BI develops, because right now I don't think there's a way to do this sort of thing without having things layered behind each other, and there's no way to eliminate this thing where like you click on something and it brings it to the front. I'd like to have statistics by teams because sometimes you're more interested in the team if they're going to keep a clean sheet, for example. You want to look into those sorts of things and then decide on a player. So right now that's a bit challenging to do, as you saw, for example, in the scatter chart with the teams. The different players being overlapping over each other, the different teams. So that's an area I want to improve. And over the course of time, people might be interested to see previous seasons and history from like, let's say 2016, 2017, right? So I'd like to add this data. As of now, I don't know if I can get the data I need to do the in-depth data that I'm showing. I don't know where to find this data, so that may be a bit challenging. But definitely for future data, I plan to maintain it. And predictive modeling, perhaps. Now that we have all the data here, we can probably do something around predictive modeling and doing something smart with it. And then I give some thanks. So obviously FPL is a free API, so it's very in depth. It's got a lot of data in there, and it's completely free to use. So that's amazing. Um, the web archive project is really cool. Essentially, it takes a snapshot of a web page and it keeps it there for its entire history, so you can retrieve any data. That's how I got the 2022-2023 season, for example, which is last season. I wouldn't ordinarily be able to get that. I wouldn't be able to get the Bootstrap API from game week 1 because I didn't start collecting it until then. So thanks to that project and all the people who are creating these snapshots. there's a GitHub user called VAA Stav who is maintaining and cleaning up all of this data and keeping a log of it. So that's also amazing. It's a very good resource if you're getting started and you don't want to deal with JSON files and pulling the data yourself with Python or Power Automate or whatever you want to use. The data on that GitHub repo is great for getting started and understanding what you can get from it. Um, and I also want to thank Microsoft actually because they offer me a way to do this where the dashboard, for all its flaws, is so interactive and you can do so much with it. And also, I can use Power Automate to sort of automate all the data getting, right? All the data gathering that's happening at 7 a.m. and p.m. Eastern time, that's done automatically. And then this dashboard is refreshed automatically with the new data. And all of these things are happening completely without my input, so it makes my life a lot easier. So um, I think that's amazing. And I pay a subscription fee, so any financial support that you can offer me, as you can see here at the top, is very much appreciated because right now it's not a lot of money, but it's coming out of my own pocket. So it would be very cool if I could get some financial support for that. I would very much appreciate it. Um, and I plan to keep this dashboard free to use always. Now and always, it will be free to use. Um, and I'm doing this in part as a part of my portfolio. And more videos may come out with me going through the back end of all of this. Much longer videos than this, and like in much more detail and in much more technicality about how I process the data, what I do to it, what goes into the thinking behind the visuals, how I process the data from Power Query, from Power Automate, in DAX, and all of these things. I do plan to do this. We'll see if I have the time. Um, so yeah, if you're interested in my abilities and skills, you can contact me on via this button. My email is contained in there. So you can contact me there about any opportunities. My LinkedIn is there. So thank you guys for watching. At this point, I'm waffling. How long have we gone for? 37 minutes. So yeah, well, good thing YouTube allows you to speed me up and skip through. So thank you for watching, and hopefully see you in more videos.